There's something special about Matt Reeves' The Batman, something that makes it stand out from other Batman movies. And for me, it's how it focuses, in every aspect, on the emotional experience of the Caped Crusader himself. Up until now, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy has been the gold standard, particularly the first 2 installments, but Reeves offers us something fresh and different that makes this 3-hour feature feel more personal. It's said that there are 3 versions of a movie: the one you write, the one you shoot, and the one you edit, as ultimately every project is in a constant state of creative evolution. The audience will only ever know about the final version, but for the director, they're assigned with the responsibility of making a series of decisions, some big, some small, until the project is complete. Decisions are made while writing and developing the script, more decisions are made during production, and even more decisions are made in the editing room. So let's examine director Matt Reeves' creative choices throughout this project. For me, there are 3 keys that really elevated The Batman from just another Batman movie to one of the best. A personalized visual style, humanizing Bruce Wayne, and thematic continuity. What's great about these keys is that they all feed into one another. Any individual decision would have kept the project fresh, but when they work in tandem, it produces something special. The first key is a personalized visual style. Now, when I say personal, I don't mean that Matt Reeves just happens to personally love using these techniques, but how they naturally create a more personal emotional attachment to our protagonist. Compared to Christopher Nolan, Reeves uses much darker, grittier tones. Nolan's trilogy has a more corporate color palette, warm oranges for lighter scenes and cold blues for darker scenes. Whereas Reeves coats everything in black. A lot of the time it's close to total darkness, and then there's a single source of light capturing the scene, sometimes stagnant like a stage or a police light, and sometimes moving like a torch or a headlight, guiding the audience's attention. Daytime in Gotham is defined by its greys and browns, contrasted by white and black, and nighttime is defined by misty yellows, fizzled reds, and shadowy black. It's shot like a detective noir movie, sometimes reminiscent of David Fincher's Zodiac and Seven. But the most important factor is Reeves' persistent use of a shallow depth of field. If you know nothing about photography, a shallow depth of field basically means that only a narrow area of the image is in focus, blurring out both the background and the foreground, in comparison to a greater depth of field where everything is in focus, typically used for landscape shots. A shallow depth of field is used in lots of movies, even Nolan's trilogy, but the difference here is how sharp and narrow that depth of field is. In Nolan's movies, typically there's a foreground filled with characters who are all in focus, and the background is a bit blurry, whereas in Reeves' The Batman, only a sliver is in focus, and everything else is very blurry. Take this scene as an example. Selina is in focus and the background is blurred out, but that's quite normal, as it's far away. Whereas even when she's right next to Batman, she's blurry too, showcasing how narrow the depth of field actually is. The decision to shoot the movie this way makes it feel more personal, as firstly, it's how our eyes tend to work. If you look around your own room right now, you'll realize that your iris focuses on one thing at a time, and everything else subtly blurs around it. This helps communicate to the audience what matters most. Reeves is forcing you to prioritize what he wants you to focus on, whether it be a character or an object. For instance, a close-up of your deceased father's cufflinks holds more emotional weight than a wide shot of the room or city. But secondly, it unlocks the emotional experience of the character. When everything is in focus, our character is just a moving part of the plot, whereas when we focus intensely on just them, the set becomes secondary and the personal lived experience of the character is enabled. This is how we all experience reality. How we're feeling alters our perception of our surroundings. And by using a shallow depth of field, the audience intensely focus on the character and how they feel internally about what's happening, more than just what's happening. This is an important distinction. In Nolan's trilogy, he makes us a spectator. There's an emotional distance between the audience and Bruce. We're merely watching the story unfold and interpret Bruce as a character in that story. Whereas Reeves puts us in the passenger seat with Bruce Wayne, filled with close-ups and point-of-view angles, so we literally see the world through his eyes. We aren't seeing Batman enter a room or fight someone from the safe distance of a mid-shot or a wide shot. We're experiencing what it feels like to be Batman, close up, whether he's entering a club, in the middle of a car chase, or fleeing a scene. Reeves chooses confronting camera angles, often shooting characters head-on, like shot-reverse shot, so that we're seeing two different human experiences on opposite sides of an interaction. These are often intimate close-ups, so we really get to investigate the character's face and develop an intuitive understanding of them as people without much dialogue needing to be said. Compare that to how Nolan shoots Christian Bale's Batman after the love of his life, Rachel, is murdered. He chooses to shoot it from behind. We only get to see the back and side of his face as he grieves. This should be the most emotional moment of the entire movie, but it still keeps the audience emotionally at bay. We are witnessing his pain, but not experiencing it with him. This leads into key number 2, humanizing Bruce Wayne. Christian Bale's Batman is more emotionally stoic and physically muscular. He's a James Bond type. When he's Bruce Wayne, he wears a suit and parties with the ladies, and as Batman, he fights to save the day while using high-tech gadgets. He has moments of adversity and injury, but we understand that he's both mentally and physically strong. Whereas Robert Pattinson's Batman is a lot more emotionally wounded. We're watching someone who's still in a state of grief, who wants vengeance on the criminals of the city for the death of his parents. The soundtrack to the movie is much more emotionally engaging. The haunting use of Ave Maria, which is often sung at funerals, acting as the villain's theme, while also fitting for our hero, as both are orphans. Robert Pattinson's performance is all about the eyes, as the eyes are the window to the soul. They're practically the only part of him we see when he's behind the mask. Eye contact is used as a tool of communication, for building trust, intimidating enemies, or confronting demons. There's much more power given to these moments of eye contact, because eye contact makes the characters feel something. The difference in how it feels to look at Selina versus how it feels to look at Edward. This makes the Batman more like just a man than a superhero. He develops real human connections, and his dynamic with Gordon and Selina feels much richer than previous renditions. He's isolated and so are they, so they discover this unspoken connection that the audience can feel because Reeves gives us time for these feelings to unfold rather than just cramming in plot points. Behaviorally, it's just more realistic. Batman doesn't mysteriously pop up like a magician or always use his gadgets perfectly. He's not a symbol of pure stoicism. He's a flawed human with emotional baggage that he's visibly still processing. The little details matter. We get to see how he enters a club, how he spies on people, and even how, when he's escaping, he's capable of experiencing real fear and trepidation, which we've never seen before. And after we fly with him, we then watch him fail, fall, and hurt himself. He's prone to human error, even messing up the start of his car chase with Penguin. He only gets out of trouble in the final act because of his personal relationship with Selina. He can't do everything by himself. He's not a standalone hero. He needs others to survive, which only makes him more human and his isolation more tragic. This leads into the final key, thematic continuity. The Batman is all about identity, the masks people wear in society.
All everyone wants to do is unmask you, but they're missing the point. I'm looking at the real you right now.
Not only do Bruce and Edward wear a mask, but we see gangs wearing face paint and other criminals hiding their identity. It poses the question, do masks allow people to behave their most authentically or their least ethically? Or are they both really the same thing deep down? In other words, is a mask allowing you to act without shame or just to hide from accountability? This is why Edward wraps his corrupt victims' faces in tape when he kills them, as they're not who the public thought they were always wearing a mask. A theme-like identity works so well in conjunction with this intimate, character-focused visual style. We see the character's vulnerability because Reeves shows us their humanity up close, so we understand their lived experience. There's a heavy concentration on how our sense of identity is derived from our parents and upbringing. For instance, Selena carries baggage from her father abandoning her and killing her mother, and Bruce and Edward are both orphans, except one was raised rich and one was raised poor, creating similar but opposing outcomes. One wants to destroy the city as vengeance, and the other wants to protect it. This is why Edward forces Bruce to uncover the truth about his own family. The heroic narrative about his father had informed his sense of identity, and Edward wants to rob him of that comforting lie, because Thomas Wayne also wore a mask. As a wealthy man involved in politics, he wasn't as squeaky clean as Bruce wanted to believe. All of these creative decisions complement one another, and when they're working in tandem, create a much more intimate experience for the viewer. It's not just a story about a good guy trying to stop a bad guy. It's a morally ambiguous investigation of grief and corruption. A process of uncovering the truth, not just about Gotham, but about yourself. Batman movies are usually very focused on the villains, and in this case there are still a feast of great performances to choose from, but by making the Batman the primary focus, Reeves delivers us something far more meaningful, as the audience get to experience his chosen identity from his perspective, and come to a deeper emotional understanding of the man behind the mask. If you enjoy content like this and want to see more of it, please do consider supporting me on Patreon, as it really does make a difference to how much content I can pump out. Or if you can't afford that, then simply like the video, subscribe, and